right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm joined today by Mati Staniszewski, the ElevenLabs co-founder and CEO. Mati, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me here. Hi, everyone.
All right. So we're going to get right into it. ElevenLabs makes AI audio models, AI voice models, and there were a lot of startups training AI foundation models a few years ago, and now there are far fewer. But ElevenLabs has managed to stick it out and actually grow quite a bit in the last few years. You have a lot of products right now. There's a lot of things that you guys do. I want to get into them, but what's your biggest focus today?
As a company, one thing that we are aiming to solve is how humans and technology interact. So a lot of the work that we do underpins that common mission. And effectively, as we think about a lot of the problems that we solved across the history, it always started, what's the problem? Can we solve it? What's the next problem that we came across the scene? So like you said, we started with voice. So one of the key things that came when we were starting the company is that a lot of the technology around us just didn't sound human. You had a lot of the knowledge, information that just wasn't accessible, and we tried to solve this through creating our own text-to-speech model and our own voice models to make it sound human. And then the next thing came about, which is to be able to create a lot of that incredible work, you need a lot of more than that. You need sounds, you need music, you need understanding of speech through speech-to-text. So we time and time again started building that across and built effectively our creative platform offering for creatives in the space. And then more recently, and I think that's the biggest focus across the company over the last 2 years, we realized that there's a big shift from static information into dynamic information, where finally you can interact with the technology in ways you could never before. With the rise of agents, conversational agents, voice agents, suddenly you can speak with the devices, they can understand you and speak back. But the main thing to actually make them valuable is bringing a lot of the information, the knowledge base inside the agent, being able to integrate it with the existing systems, whether it's the Google, whether it's the Salesforce data, then figuring out a way to deploy the agent in a way which is testable, where you can evaluate over time, you can monitor, you have the right safeguards in place. So the main thing for us today is helping some of the biggest companies to starting companies deploying their conversational agents and be able to interact with their users in new ways.
So I want to get back to agents, but that's a lot of things. And there's also the new AI-generated music platform that you guys launched over the summer. I see you guys as competing with OpenAI in some aspects. I see you guys competing with Adobe on some AI voice tools. How should we think about you?
Across AI space, what we are seeing is that there's increasing overlap when the foundational models now can create all the modalities. Increasingly, they also shift to that multi-model approaches. Yes, you're right. There will be a lot of overlaps. Our key focus is helping people get the best of audio for creative workflow, and then helping deploy conversational agents. And of course, underpinning that, and maybe that's what makes us unique in the space, is that we build our own models, where a lot of the companies that you mentioned, for them, those use cases that use the best of voice and deploy the best of voice are very rare. So whether that's building the models, frequently those companies won't build the models themselves and will choose to partner with others. And then the application side that you need to deploy the agent or the creative work is actually pretty complex. If you're creating, let's say, an audiobook, you need to go through a number of steps. And we spoke this before heading out a scene. You need to correct the pronunciation to make sure the words sound perfect. You need to select the right voices for each of the characters. So the whole exercise of creating and narrating the audiobook is pretty tricky. When we started the company, actually, on that case, when we first released our ElevenLabs interface, it was this tiny box where people could copy-paste effectively a tweet length and download the work. And what quickly transpired is it's not enough. However, we still had users that we had one of these audiobook authors that would copy-paste his entire book, download it, stitch it up together. It was like 300 copy-pastes, and then release it, and it was great. That person returned with a number of other people, and we realized, OK, you need a lot more of the interface to actually build it. The same exact thing happened with agents, where we worked deeply with a customer in a healthcare space, a company called Hippocratic. They do this incredible use case where they help automate appointment scheduling for patients calling in to the healthcare units, but then also call them back to remind them about taking medicine, ask them and remind them about taking the appointment, and all of that is done through voice agents. But to be able to do that, they invested so much time to combine the text-to-speech, the LLMs of the brain, the speech-to-text, orchestrate that all together, and then bring that to the real actions. And then the same thing appeared across so many of other customers, and we knew that to be able to solve that use case at scale, we need to do a lot more. And I think that's the unique thing that we don't see many other companies do. The application side is very shallow.
Something I've seen in the AI foundation model space is that companies keep trying to get bigger. They keep trying to tackle more. They need more funding, so they need to be more ambitious. I want to know, you've basically centered your entire company on audio right now, but have you considered focusing on other kinds of models, generating video or images kind of models?
So you are right, the size of the models is scaling in most of the other modalities. In audio, the slight difference is that it's still less about the scale, it's a lot more about the model architecture. I have a lack of having a brilliant co-founder, smartest person I know who leads a lot of our research, has been able to assemble some of the best researchers and in the world for audio and been able to crack some of the model architecture challenges. And we still think this will be true in the audio space for the next year or two. Over long term, it will commoditize. Over the next couple of years, it's critical.
You think it will commoditize?
In the long term, yes. I think it will, even if there's differences, which I think will be the truth for some voices, some languages, on its own, the differences will be smaller over time. So
why make the models if you think they'll commoditize?
Because in the short term, they are the biggest advantage and the biggest step change you can have. Today, where the voices still don't sound good, we need to solve that problem. Now when the interactions don't sound good, we need to solve that problem. The only way to solve it is for building the models yourself. And then over long term, there will be other players that will solve that too. Hopefully we are first time and time again. But the call is to solve those. But to your question, the pattern we are seeing is if you want a reliable, scalable use case, you will likely still use different models for different use cases, so best of breed across. So like in the agent space, you want the reliability and scalability across the kind of as the key component. You want explainability of the model. So then you are good with using speech-to-text, LLM text-to-speech, so you know each of the steps, you can link it up to the tooling in the right way. If it's slightly different space, what we do expect in the next year or two is kind of what you mentioned, where increasing amount of models will move into a multi-model or fused approaches. So you will create audio and video at the same time, or audio and LLMs at the same time in a conversational setting. Google with VO3, incredible model that they've released, is a good example of what you can achieve if you combine those two together. And we are planning to do experiments in partnership with other companies and independently to see whether we can combine our audio expertise with some of the expertise of other models to make that easier for our customers. Because ultimately, in the long term, yes, it will be needed.
Other companies training AI video models you're thinking about partnering with?
Either other AI companies or open source. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of those companies?
Still figuring this one out. We have close conversations with a few of our close friends.
I mean, I think that that is a trend that we see a lot, where these, Sora and VO3, you generate both at the same time, and I imagine creatives are increasingly looking to do that. And I mean, there's the other challenge that you face of you're competing against these players, and they're far more capitalized than you are. So, are you thinking more about partnerships or potentially being acquired by someone in the future? Like, how do you compete with them?
We are building a generational company, and we want to stay independent and build something that will create that value in the long term. So the whole thesis of how we think about combining the model and other work is that you cannot just rely on the model. You need to build the models, but then you also need that application side. That's why for us, it's so important to treat models as the head start, invest and be the best in the audio space, while at the same time build a creative platform offering and build agents platform offering. And that's the combination of building AI and building product That's the magic. The same way like software and hardware was the magic for Apple, we think the product and AI will be the magic for the next generation of the best use cases. Now, what I think is tricky, and that's where we expect in the next couple of years is essential, is on the audio side itself. So far, we've been able to create a text-to-speech model that was beating out some benchmarks recently on speech-to-text, now on music. But then there's a second step of how you combine that model with, let's say you take an open source video model. That fusing step is actually challenging and tricky. So here too, we hope to be one of the first to figure that out, to do it in both high quality way and reliable way. We don't today plan to train some of the compute or data intensive models that competitors do. And of course, that's just a segment. That's why it's so important to do the product side.
Well, whatever you're doing, I mean, you talk about the application layer, and that has really been a success for you guys. I know a lot of companies that are really using ElevenLabs, and I'm curious, like when I look at OpenAI and Google and their suite of products, I don't see a one-to-one competitor to a lot of the things that you build, and I'm curious why you think some of your larger competitors haven't encroached on these products. Or have they?
I don't know. Of course, they do set of use cases across. All of those companies will have some version of a creator tooling and some version of distribution. But I think the truth is in all those cases it's a matter of focus. And I think in our case, we were straight focused on solving this human-computer interaction problem. Initially it was voice, now it's linking it to other systems. And I think many of the companies have just so many other parts that they rightly are trying to fix and tackle. But at the same time, I think, like as you think about the competition, in many ways we are not looking at them in that way. Of course, we are seeing what's the newest things that are happening, but kind of our vision is independent of what they do.
I mean, I think there's one argument to be made where critics would say that what you've created is something of a risky platform where people have been able to use it to create deepfakes, and maybe OpenAI and Google, who are already facing a lot of criticism for their AI tools, don't want to subject themselves to that. And do you think that's a fair argument?
We could also argue that with recent Sora 2 release, they are taking much more risk than we would ever do. So as we think about ourselves as like a leading company in the voice space, so important that you combine a lot of releases with the safeguards. So for us, what this means is from the moment we released, you can always trace back the content back to who generated that content. You can trace and understand whether it's AI or not AI, which we think will be an important paradigm in the space, that you understand AI versus not AI content. But then second, we do invest a lot in the moderation of different voices and different content itself, so you can catch that before it's created or flag it for further review. And then the last thing is we especially over the last years, we collaborated a lot in how we can use a lot of those things that we find ourselves with other players to hopefully bring that as a standard to the space. So one of those examples is you need to be able to detect AI content, but not only for ElevenLabs, but for all audio companies. And now the biggest wave that we see is a lot of open source companies, a lot of other commercial models from China that are coming as a competition, and you cannot detect that. So we are collaborating with University of Oxford, Berkeley, Reality Defender to create effectively classifier models to detect it. But maybe last thing, which was a good example, recently, a few months ago, we worked with a charity in UK where there was, they used effectively the voice agents, AI voice agents to, as the call was coming in, based on IP, if it was likely a scammer, the voice agent would take over with the purpose of wasting the scammer's time. And it worked beautifully. And it was a nice way of using AI voices exactly against the scam and fraud that's happening.
I want to ask about the deepfakes because it feels like a problem that we were talking about a lot a year ago, and then I think a lot of people have just kind of felt like we're in a world where we can't tell what is the difference between an AI voice and a real voice. I mean, what's your response to that? Like, how do you think in the next few years, can you talk to me about some of your efforts to combat that? So
there are two parts. Like one is what will definitely happen is we think there will be more AI-generated content than human content. You might have seen some of that recently on AI music, where that's closely becoming over 50%. So I think that should be a default that everybody is operating on. AI-generated content will be out there with more of human content, and by extension, we'll need to expect and know that most of the content that's out there can be AI-generated. Now, the tricky thing is, what will start happening is you will have, of course, fully AI-generated content, but also semi-edited AI content, and then a little bit AI-edited content, and then it's like very hard to tell. We worked, so Audible today bans AI audiobooks from being out there. And we have this interesting, tricky dilemma with some of the book authors that use it, that sometimes you would use it for a sentence. Is that AI generated, or is it fine, or 100% AI generated, probably not fine. So it's like, where is that balance? And then as you start editing, removing sounds, removing noise, AI is, of course, such a now buzzwordy term, but it actually is used in all parts of that production process. So it becomes super tricky. So that's the first thing. I would make it clear, and I think it's the expectation that we are going with, that most of the content out there will be AI generated. And then the second thing, what's the actual solution? If we like leapfrog in how we think about it and how we are collaborating with the governments and institutes working on that, is a kind of a three-step approach. The first layer would be a detecting for human content. So instead of thinking about AI-generated content, you actually detect whether this is a human side. There's a separate problem of human authenticity piece, but in general, we encode the devices that this is device belonging to me. If I'm calling you, your device decodes, okay, this is call coming from Mati, and then you know that this is likely a trustworthy source, all fine. Second level is opted-in, watermarked AI content. So all of us here will have their own voice agent that will do tasks on our behalf. We'll call a restaurant to book it, we'll reschedule doctor's appointment, and you will need the voice agent. But you want it to be authenticated voice agent, and the other side to know that this is authenticated voice agent. And here, the watermarking aspect of effectively bringing that information that I gave the permission for the voice agent to act on my behalf will be important. And then the third layer, by default, everything else is AI and fake. And then you can add additional models like check or not check, but that's where we should be going. And we operate on all three levels, mostly on the second and third one today. The first one is super tricky without the collaboration of the entire space, but the second we are exploring and already working on watermarking, and then on like more additional metadata that you can carry across.
Specifically to your products, do you see people using ElevenLabs tools to orchestrate adversarial attacks?
No, we are fighting all the time against those. So if it's the like both the system of moderation and flagging that, but then also just the restrictions we have before you even use the product are fighting out a lot of the bad users. Of course, if the new use cases appear, we try to extend this. I think the tricky thing here is, like, if you think about the misuse for the world, is that technology is already out there in the open without any restrictions that ElevenLabs puts. Yeah. So as you think about open source, you can do exactly some of the nefarious cases, and there's no way to have traceability, to have moderation, to have the ability to detect whether this was AI or not, or who generated that. So it's a tricky space, and here too we are collaborating with others to find this.
I'm curious, like with all this like talk about like you say there's going to be more AI generated content out there than human. What do you think the value is of a human generated voice and a human generated piece of music in the AI age?
Look, there's so many things. One is the nuance and the slight, and I think it applies actually both in the AI and the human space, nuance of dialect, the accent, the voice. So I'll speak about this a little bit. But then there's also the second piece, as you think about music, if you think about creating an audiobook, if you're creating a movie, it's at the end of the day, it's about the story. It's about some of the emotions that people felt in a given moment, something that connects you to the other side that actually makes it human. I'm sure you follow a lot of people in the space, and it's a lot more frequently than just the act that was created that makes it so valuable. And I think this will remain true as long as all of us are here, where you do attach to the other person, you follow that story and an emotional part. And then on the voice side, there's, so first of all, even in AI space, today we've created a voice marketplace where everybody can create their voice and share the voice, and when the voice is being used by other users, you earn money as a result. The voice works across all 70 languages. Our top voice is a Spanish voice that sounds incredible in English. So most of the users are English speakers. So if any of you want to register on the platform, we need more voices. But there's just so many different ones that effectively show how dialect, accent, different languages is important. And still, we are just scratching the surface. We have 10,000 voices shared this way, paid $10 million back to the community, and I think there's like just a wave of other special, unique voices across the universe. So that's one, and then two, ability to collect on a deeper level.
I mean, do you think we're moving to a world where there's, someone that you're a fan of? Like maybe there's like a filmmaker or a storyteller you're a fan of, and you seek out their content, but then maybe all the content around them becomes AI generated. Do you understand? I mean, because I think a lot of what you're doing is, you're kind of taking these things at the edges, like the voiceover or like the background music, and you're saying that can just be AI. But you realize that creates a market where fewer people can be artists.
So first of all, to the first part of the question, so one of the artists I love is will.i.am. He'll be speaking on ElevenLabs Summit on 11/11, of course. But we spoke a little bit about this, and of course, the quality needs to be good. I don't think we are close there, but it's not there yet. But yes, I do imagine where artists like this could create their work, and you could extend it and personalize it, or you could localize it. So Shakira famously sings in English and in Spanish. If that was possible across all the different languages, it would be incredible. So that's the kind of the first part. The second part, yes, with the technology innovation, there will be more people that create content, but at the same time, it unlocks all the people that couldn't create before because it was unaffordable, because you needed to go to a studio to record if you just zoom into the music. Now, all of that is accessible to people that don't have the budget to go record and find a studio, to find the equipment. Two shifts before, the music would just not be possible to be created if you don't have the access to the studio space. And I feel the same about AI technology. Yes, it lowers there's more content, but it lowers the bar for other people to be able to start, which has not been possible. And then two, still you will have the same amount of people following and keen to have the deeper connection, or even more, which wasn't possible before.
You mentioned, I want to just get into your business for a second here, because you do have a really booming business. You announced a few months ago that you guys had surpassed $200 million in ARR, and that by the end of 2025, you'd like to surpass $300 million in ARR. How close are you to that goal?
We are close. We are still on target. We have just incredible partners from companies like Cisco or Deutsche Telekom, automating their customer experience work to innovating with their new use cases, which is true all the way to some of the fastest growing startups like Perplexity, which will use that as part of the interaction with the devices. But even outside of that space, what was probably almost a positive surprise is some of the governments leaning in and how they can use that. Recently, we announced our work with the government of Ukraine, who are creating the first agentic government, where all the people across society will have access to education through AI, will be able to access the government services through AI customer support, which is just incredible to see, of course, pro bono. But across all of that, it's very clear that the way we interact with technology is changing, and hopefully as ElevenLabs we can play a big role in making that and crossing the 300 by end of the year. And
you've expanded into a lot more places than I think people expected, working with governments, for example, in music. And I'm curious, 5 years from now, how do you think about ElevenLabs, and how should we think about you?
I hope that we are a go-to place for anything creative. We are a go-to place if you are trying to deploy conversational agent that's reliable. And our mission of solving the problem, of making it easy and seamless to communicate with that incredible innovation that's happening across technology is solved. and we've played a big role in that.
All right. I think that's our time, but thank you, Mati. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Max.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.